Hello everybody. In today's Touchdesigner tutorial, we would actually come across some of the amazing patterns that can be created with very few selected nodes of Touchdesigner. And you would be amazed at how these small level of elements or nodes can literally create some of the best animation patterns in a very short span of time. And as you can see on the screen, that there are 6 different patterns that we would create with just one particular design as a part of our TMN tutorial. And the most fascinating thing that I would want to bring this out today is with very basic things, these animations or these flawless, very smooth particle movements can be created. So yeah, it's gonna be amazing. We'll just say how these 6 different patterns can be created, and we'll just go with that. All right, let's get going with our Touchdesigner tutorial. All right, so we start with constant. So we'll go to chop, we'll have constant, and this constant is going to it's going to help us to define the samples. So at this stage, we set the sample size as 500. We use patterns. We will be using 2 patterns here. So let's have 2 patterns, and let's have a noise. Pattern 1 is going to help us to define Tx. Noise is going to help us to define Ty. And the second pattern is going to help us to define TZ. Let's go around and set the sample value based on the constant that we have. So that can be driven by using the reference and changing the length of it. Let's do the same thing for the second pattern. So we all set. As you can see, the length for patterns is starting from 0 to 499 or 1 to 500. So in a nutshell, we need 500 samples. Okay. In noise, this is something different. It's actually ranging from 1 to 600. That can be changed by going to going to channel option and switching from seconds to samples. So let's switch from seconds to samples and start and end. Now here we see 599. Let's try and use the constant to define our range. But even after defining the range, we don't see 0 to 499 or 1 to 500. So let's apply a little bit of tweak. Let's go and use -1. Now we will have the same length across all the different chops that we have defined. Now is the time to use merge. Let's use merge. Let's apply it, and we go. Now we have to define the pattern. So we want to make it as a ramp. Let's go with ramp. I'll be changing, we'll change the range later on. Let's use pattern 2 as constant because I just want a constant line for TZ. I don't want to play around with that at this point of time. Let's go with null, and this null will be later used for the instancing. Now let's start with the SOP. I'll go with add, and then I'll have convert. I'll have convert. Yes, there you go. Okay, let's go ahead with add, and then we'll be using convert. Add, we're going to define a point. That point will be converted into particles per point, and we would be using the rendering particle type as the point sprite. Let's apply a null on top of it. Let's use that null to define the geometry. Let's have the camera. Let's have the material. I'll be using point sprite. Let's apply it as a material. And there you go. Now let's define the render top, our render network. So let's go with render. Let's go with null. Let's go with RGB key. The one thing that we have to do is go to render, define the pixel format as 32-bit RGB. So that turns out to be really good. As you can see, there's a tiny dot available to see. That dot can be increased in a size by changing the scale value. So as soon as I change the scale value, this turns out to be more brighter and brighter. So let's set the scale value as 2. Now is the time to go around and use the instancing. Let's enable the instancing. I'll be using null1 to have my instancing defined, tx, ty, and tz. As you can see, the whole pattern is nothing but the replication of the waveform that I see on my noise. As in when I change things on my noise, it's going to change its position on my render network. One thing that you would see is there is nothing coming up on the minus side. It's because my tx is just defined between 0 to 1. If I change it, so let's go around and change to -2 to +2. So this gives me a wonderful look. And now this pretty much covers my entire network. Let's go ahead and start with the animation, and I would be using TZ for my change of the animation. Time.frame, and I'll be multiplying that with 0.8. So now we see wonderful stuff coming up. This is still kind of very fast. Let's change the period from 1 to 3, so it's very smooth. Now is the time to apply our feedback network. So let's go with feedback. Let's have level, let's have transform, let's have composite. This is what we need at this point of time. Let's place it in a proper way. Go here. Let's apply it to comp. We use comp as add, and let's use this. Now we can see that things are turning out to be nicer. Let's use level and change the opacity to 0.97. And we would be using transform to define some better values for our transformation of the waves which are coming up. For that to happen, I'll be working with the scale. So I'll change that to 0.98. Then I would also be working on the translate value, and let's have it towards the positive end. And here we can see a wonderful pattern being created just by working with very small values. The other thing that we can definitely do in this is we can have harmonics. So let's set the harmonics to 2, and we'll see some more waves coming up. And this gives a really fluid, much better look to our pattern that we want to create as a part of this tutorial. And you can also play around with the amplitude. So currently the amplitude is set to 1. Let's increase it to 1.5, and you'd see more jumps coming in. This pretty much can be the waves can be smoothened up by changing the harmonics. So let's set it to 1. You also have the roughness to play around with. You can go and change the roughness, and you'll see much smoother waveforms coming up. And yeah, this is perfect, which we wanted to define and design as a part of our first pattern. Let's go on to the next one, which is something different, but can be created just with the same pattern set and the network that we have defined here. All right, so let's get going with another pattern that we want to create. So for that to happen, let's take this feedback network completely off. And we can just have this direct connection to comp. Now what we're going to do is we would actually use a SOP called as copy. So let's have copy. Let's have 30 as the copy. So we're going to have 30 copies of the same line that we see. We definitely don't see those 30 copies at this point of time. The reason being we have not used a translate. So let's try and use translate, and you can start to see the difference. So now this brings us to our second pattern. You could say that there is this space which is completely empty. Let's try and compensate on that by using the view angle of camera. So we can go and reduce the view angle. And with that, you will be able to see these movements coming in. There's another option that we have is let's increase number of copies by 100. So we get more number of copies of the same stuff. And then we can again reduce the value of X so we can actually cover our screen completely. Now you'd also notice that there is a lot of different wave which is falling it out. That can be reduced um, by changing the amplitude of it. So let's change the amplitude and now we will see the movements to be better. We can play around with the roughness, and by reducing the roughness we can pretty much control on how well the waves are forming up. So yes, this is another pattern that you can create through this. The other important thing that you could actually give a try is by reducing the number of samples. Here we have 500. Let's try and use 200. So this gives much more fluid and smooth and very nice pattern. The other thing that you can try and do is playing around with a little bit of period, and by increasing the amplitude, so the waves will be much bigger and you'd see a better representation of your patterns. So let's give it a try with noise, and this time we would actually give it a try with the exponent. With exponents, you can pretty much get the kind of look that we were anticipating. And yeah, so this is how you will be able to produce the second pattern that we mentioned about. So let's go with the third thing. Here actually we are going to play with the Z direction. So let's go around and play with Z direction, and this is where we see how it is turning out to be on the horizon. Um, Now let's try and add a couple of things here. First thing first, we go and put down the exponent so that we get a little bit of, so let's make exponent as 1. Let's have the amplitude as 2. We'll also have period, and this time we'll make period as 1.18. So we see a little bit of more movement. The other thing that we would want to give it a try is, so yeah, let's make roughness as 1. Let's have harmonics as 1. And what we would do is, since this is turning out to be very impulsive, let's increase the period. So this pretty much gives us a better view. Here, what am I going to do is I'm going to reduce the number of copies to 30. And we can increase it the way in which we want to go with. So let's have around 70. And we'll make amplitude as 1.29 to get that better look. The other thing that we can give it a try is we can go to pattern. Instead of -2, let's have -4 to 4. So this really gives a nice view and distribution of all the particles in a nicer way. We can increase the period, or we can actually reduce the period to get some more movements. Let's increase the amplitude. Let's reduce the exponent. Actually, let's make exponent as 1. And we can have harmonics. So with the change in harmonics, we can get a better view actually. But for now, we'll just keep it 1. And we can have some more speed. So this is where our output is turning out to be absolute perfect. Let's increase the amplitude so we see more deeper moves. And yeah, this is where some new patterns can be created. All right, so the another pattern that we are going to work is going to be on the perspective of our camera. So currently, if you look at it, the camera has been projected to see with 5 as TZ and minus 0.7 for TY. But let's try and use the camera viewing angle. So this is how I would want to see it. Let's bring it a little down. And now what we want to do is let's have period as this. We can work out on 0. So let's reset the camera first. All right, now what we do is we go to copy and let's remove the direction that we have given on z-axis. So this is all done. Now let's go to camera, and what we want to showcase is we want to create the ripples, and the ripples we need is more, the bigger one. So let's have the bigger ripples coming in. And what we try to do is let's change from -4 to +2. So we have more number of ripples coming in. We definitely have to work on the exponent, so we'll make it as 1. We have the roughness. We increase the harmonics. And let's have, and now we would be using our camera So this is where another pattern that we wanted to create. Now this is very, very impulsive. We can go and increase the size of the period. And this is where we can say we get to experience some different animation patterns. So this is another pattern that we wanted to create as a part of this tutorial. And the last thing that we want to show is, let's go to point sprite. Let's increase the point scale. And now we see some crazy movement coming in. Let's increase the period. And now let's reduce the exponent to the level where it can produce some better output. Let's go and increase the roughness. Let's make it as 0.5. Oh, we can actually have 0.79. And we can play with the harmonics. And as and when we change the harmonics, it pretty much creates that level of effect. Now, what we could do is we can go a little down from on y-axis. And yeah, so this is one more pattern that we wanted to create as a part of our tutorial. Let's reset the camera. And let's go to 5. So at least we know we are back to the reset position of the camera. And all right, so the values that we're going to put is we'll make roughness as 1. We'll have exponent value as 0.1. We'll have period, which is this. We'll make harmonics as 1. Let's go and yep, there you go. So this is how I say my new pattern's coming up. Now again, if we want to increase the space between the particles, we just go to patterns. Let's increase it to -3 to 3. And this is where we would be able to produce this new pattern. The other thing that you realize is the shape of the pattern is completely dependent on the noise which is being formed here, and which is where we see our output popping up. By changing the values in exponent, you see the difference coming around. So let's make it as 0.1. We can change the roughness so we can get some better result. We can increase the roughness as well. So it gives much different look. We can play around with the harmonics. So harmonics will give more impulsive reaction to the design. But yeah, at the end, this is how we can produce different patterns with just a simple node of networks. And the last thing that we want to show is all right, so what we do is we go from -2 to 2. Let's change the period to 1. Let's keep the harmonics as 1, roughness as 1, exponent as 1.7, and we'll have amplitude as 1 as well. So here you can say how well these patterns are forming up. Now all we have to do is let's go and come closer towards our object. So let's go with this. So we go with 0.5. Let's increase the sample from 200 to 500 so we see more. Let's try and use our camera position to produce that level of output. So I go little like this, and there you go. So this is the way in which I'm trying to look at my object, and it is producing that kind of effect, which is really cool. So you can actually get to know that how small things can produce such a beautiful output. We can try and change the samples from 500 to 400. So it's a little bit lucid. We can increase the point constant from 2 to 2.5. So it's a little brighter and bigger. And yeah, so this is what I wanted to bring it out. I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial. You can follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on YouTube. There are a lot of things that I do with respect to the abstract art. I'll be more than happy to read your comments, any request if you guys have for tutorials. I'll be more than happy to create for you. And yes, I wish you happy learning. Thank you so much. And I say goodbye from Sydney. Bye for now.